Have you ever heard of the deadly conflict that broke out after the First World War had ended? Did you know that after World War I was over, a series of bloody conflicts, uprisings, civil wars and conflicts between new nations occurred? In this video, we're going to take a look at the violent aftermath of the First World War in Central and Eastern Europe. Stay tuned. Welcome back, regular viewers, and if this is your first time here, my name is Stefan. I'm a history teacher from the Netherlands and I'm hustling history for you. If you like this content, then I encourage you to watch another video, and if you like that one as well, consider subscribing. Also hit the notification bell so you become part of the hustle. This episode is more of a summary of the conflicts that broke out after the First World War had ended. We do this per country, so let's get right to it. Germany saw a mutiny in Kiel in November 1918. Now, this led to the abdication of the German Kaiser, the establishment of a new social democratic government, and the armistice. The First World War had ended. Now, after this, a series of left-wing uprisings took place in Germany, which is known under the collective name of the German Revolution of 1918-1919. On several locations in the former German Empire, left-wing uprisings took place and socialist Soviet republics were proclaimed, for example in Bavaria and in Bremen. Now, the most well-known uprising was the Spartacist Uprising, which took place in Berlin January 1919 and was led by Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht. Now, this uprising was suppressed by German paramilitary forces known as the Freikorps, and they helped the government. Now, later these men would see action in the Ruhr Valley against the Red Ruhr Army. Around the same time, a right-wing coup attempt took place in Berlin, known as the Putsch, which failed as well. In 1923, Adolf Hitler made its move in Munich. This uprising was known as the Bierkellerputsch, and it also failed. The Weimar Republic was here to stay, for now. Hungary. The communists did manage to take power in Hungary, and this happened in March 1919, where the communist Béla Kun managed to install the Hungarian Soviet Republic that replaced the very short-lived Hungarian Republic that came out of the now crumbled Austrian-Hungarian Empire. Kun wanted to reclaim the area of Transylvania and got into fighting with the Romanians. The Hungarian-Romanian War would end in August that year, where basically the Hungarian Soviet Republic was dissolved. So was the very short-lived Slovak Soviet Republic that existed for less than a month. Poland. Poland was reborn in November 1918, but its borders were everything but secure. The Poles fought in the west during the Greater Poland Uprising and the Silesian Uprisings against German troops and militia. In both cases, the Poles proclaimed victory. Now, in January 1919, the Poles fought a short war against the Czechoslovaks over an area called Silesia. Eventually, this area was partitioned by these newborn nations. Now, the East was much more messier than this. Yes, the Poles fought in Galicia. Galicia previously had belonged to the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. Now that empire was no more. Galicia was inhabited by many ethnic Poles and Ukrainians. The Ukrainians, they established the Western Ukrainian People's Republic. The Poles got into Galicia. This fighting was known as the Polish-Ukrainian War of 1919. The Poles proclaimed victory and the West Ukrainian People's Republic was no more. The Poles also fought in the Vilnius region against the Lithuanians, and also here the Poles proclaimed victory. Now, their biggest battle was against the Soviets during the Polish-Soviet War. Now, to discuss this battle, we need to take a look at its eastern neighbor, Russia. In Russia, the turmoil had already started in 1917. In that year, two revolutions took place. One in February, where Social Democrats seized power, and another one in October, where the communists known as the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, seized control. Now, from the moment that the Bolsheviks seized control, a devastating conflict broke out, known as the Russian Civil War. It's a very big and complicated conflict, so let's break it down in understandable parts. The Bolsheviks were known as the Reds, And the Reds, they fought against the Whites. Who were the Whites? The Whites were basically the anti-communist Russian forces. They were led by Kolchak in the east, Wrangel and Denikin in the south, and Yudenich in the northwest. And then there was also the Allied Intervention Force, where Western powers sent their troops to different parts of the former Russian Empire to assist the Whites. In the second half of 1919, it seemed that the Bolshevik government was done for when General Denikin launched his advance on Moscow. It seemed that the Bolshevik government would go down in history as yet another short-lived Russian state. However, the supply lines of the Whites were dangerously overstretched, and also Denikin's forces had to face an enemy in the south, the anarchist Black Army led by Nestor Makhno, who allied himself with the Bolsheviks. Therefore, the White forces had to retreat, and this led to a chaotic evacuation at Crimea. The Russian Civil War would last till 1924, and the Reds would proclaim victory. But why did the Reds win? There were basically two main reasons for that. The first reason was the fact that the Reds had a very strong base with Moscow and its surroundings because of the railway infrastructure and the industries located there. Therefore, they were able to wage an effective war against the Whites. And the Whites were simply too divided. Some of the Whites wanted to restore the monarchy. Other White commanders wanted to become the new ruler of Russia. And therefore, they were not able to work together effectively. And perhaps the most important reason why the Reds won was the fact that the Reds had a message of equality, of the end of exploitation. I mean, to what extent the Reds actually carried out this message is highly debatable, but still, the Whites, they had no message. Where did the Whites stand for? Restoration of the monarchy? People were done with that. As historian Orlando Fages puts it, psychologically, the Whites conducted themselves as if nothing had happened, whereas in reality, the whole world around them had collapsed, and in order to vanquish the enemy, they themselves had to undergo, in a certain sense, a rebirth. Nothing so harmed the White movement as this very condition of psychologically staying put in previous circumstances which had ceased to exist. The Russian Civil War saw also many peasant rebellions and wars of independence. Territories that previously belonged to the Russian Empire now wanted to become their own independent nation. In the chaos of the Russian Civil War, the Baltic nations, Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania, managed to fight themselves free in wars of independence. Ukraine, however, was not successful. I already mentioned the West Ukrainian state that would find its demise at the hands of the Poles. There was also the Ukrainian People's Republic, with the capital of Kiev. Now, this republic got into fighting with the Bolsheviks. Eventually, the Ukrainians joined forces with the Poles, but at the end, most Ukrainians would live under Bolshevik rule. And they were not the only ones that seemed to be overrun by the Bolsheviks. Here were the Poles. Now, initially, the Poles managed to take a successful offensive against the Reds over the course of 1919, capturing cities like Minsk, Lviv, and eventually Kiev. However, the Polish supply lines were overstretched, and the Polish soldiers became exhausted. I mean, they mostly had to walk these enormous distances. Soviet Red Army commander Mikhail Tukhachevsky then launched a successful counter-offensive, and he drove the Poles all the way to Warsaw. Now, in the south, would-be Soviet leader Joseph Stalin was commanding an army trying to take Lviv, but he didn't succeed in this. Nevertheless, Tukhachevsky's troops might have been decimated by also again these enormous distances and the Polish defenses. It seemed like the Polish capital of Warsaw was done for. And then what would happen? If Poland had become communist, perhaps Germany would have become communist. And if Germany had become communist, probably the west of Europe would have become communist. Yet, the Poles, they managed to decipher the messages of the Red Army. And also, Polish leader Joseph Pilsudski, he spotted a weak spot in the Red Army defenses at the south of Warsaw, and he went right into it. As a result of this, whole Red Army divisions became surrounded and disintegrated, and they had to retreat. The Russian invasion of Poland had indeed turned into a disaster. Tukhachevsky's units had already been badly degraded by illness, stranglers, and desertion even before the Battle of Warsaw, and the losses in the fighting around the Vistula left Tukhachevsky with perhaps only 1/3 of the men with whom he launched the invasion. The Poles pursued him into the autumn until exhaustion on both sides and the onset of muddy season made further fighting impossible. Under pressure from the Western powers, the Poles agreed to a ceasefire. A peace treaty was signed in March 1921. Another civil war that was waged on a smaller scale but was very devastating was the Finnish Civil War. Here, the Reds fought against the Whites, and the Whites would proclaim victory. One important conflict I have to mention was the Greco-Turkish War. This war was mostly fought on Anatolia, which technically belongs to Asia or Asia Minor. Therefore, I want to save this conflict for another video where I can also discuss the conflicts that happened in the Caucasus and Central Asia around that time. Thanks to my patrons you see on screen, and a special thanks to Henry Clarkson, Cooling Castleman, the President, Michael Nosek, and Wombat Cookie. If you want to support me, go to the link right here. I covered a lot of these conflicts individually on location. If you want to know more about that, you go to the playlist right here. Do not forget to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. See you later.